Sir Ebenezer Howard envisioned a city where you could have all the advantages of both the city and the country, but take away the destruction, overpopulation, and unhealthy environment. In his book Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform, he explained that there should be plenty of fresh air, gardens, sunlight, and playing room. Sir Ebenezer Howard's vision inspired many cities to start planning their own garden cities.
At present, Hagerstown appears to be like any other city, but in 1909, Miss Clara Hamilton laid out the Oak Hill addition, the hidden gem of Hagerstown. All inhabitants of her garden city were made to comply with a specific set of regulations. Such regulations included that no residence or dwelling be erected on any lot of 100 feet, costing less than $5,000, that no shop, factory, saloon, or business house of any kind shall be erected or maintained, but the premises shall be occupied and used for residence purposes only, and not otherwise. However, one large business, the Moeller Organ Company, was relatively near to the Oak Hill district. A lot of Hagerstown inhabitants were employed in the organ factory. The idea was that the Oak Hill residents would be within walking distance of their employment. This was just another example of the many innovations flowing from this impressive neighborhood.
There was a requirement for each house to cost at least $1,000 or $1,200 or $1,400. Things have changed. There were requirements to maintain the big trees, though interestingly, one of the things I just learned, Mrs. Hamilton, they were essentially an easement on the properties, and Mrs. Hamilton owned that easement and owned those trees, and trees had to be maintained in perpetuity, which unfortunately they haven't. Unfortunately, no minorities could own a property here. Property owners were restricted from selling their property to minorities. Just that whole mindset of a time pretty long gone. There were a couple of specifics, and there's, they were expecting everybody to, keep their homes up to snuff. Of course, they were brand new, right. Pretty easy. And, property owners here weren't, they were interested to keep them up. These were the Joneses that everybody tries to keep up with. Let's see, I was elected mayor in '85. By '87, I think even by '86, we had the preservation districts. And those are really a function of zoning laws. And those do come with architectural restrictions, such that if you're making an addition to the house, like the big Tudor house, was about half that size until around the mid-'80s. You couldn't tell that it was expanded. I mean, it just looked that it was all built that way. So it was those kind of requirements. If it's a new building as an infill, in the terminology of the preservationists, it had to have the same size, rhythm, and scale.
The regulations also give specifics as to how closely the houses were to be built. This ensured that Oak Hill had plenty of open space and even room for several park-like areas within the district. Even though some of the many trees in the area were affected in later years, it remains evident that plant life was a major factor in this neighborhood. In fact, in 1964, a resident of Hagerstown remarked that one house in Oak Hill stood on a beautiful hill surrounded by oaks so enormous that many of the branches were suspended by huge chains.
as you've been studying, the Oak Hill movement, which was begun in England at the end of the 1800s, was all about trying to develop an area plan, an urban plan that allowed for people to be able to be healthy, live near where they worked, and set aside beauty and environmental sustainability as part of the land planning. I think we've moved into that, we've moved out of that in the last 100 years with respect to land planning. There seems to be a strong influence again coming back to environmental planning as part of a cityscape. The city of Hagerstown is now going into a new urban tree canopy plan. So we're starting to reconnect with what was considered basic principles back at the turn of the last century that we kind of forgot about along the way. So I think that's one of the important things of the Garden City movement. I think in conjunction with Oak Hill, this area could have been developed in a lot of different ways. Clara Hamilton, who was the original, I guess I would say, architect in her own way of this subdivision layout, could have said, I want the highest and best density I can get here, and sold property lots that were very, very small and very ungracious. She did indeed lay out a plan that allowed for people to be able to walk to where they work. There are smaller densities, or higher densities near where the factories would have been, and then starting from the pinnacle of her own home, just graciously laying out different urban plans that complement a true Garden City vision. And her attraction to the trees, her understanding of the importance of the trees, I think is quite remarkable. I'm very interested. I'd love to have met someone like Clara and her daughter, Julia Briscoe, because these were women who were active in land planning and subdividing and negotiating things long before she even had the right to vote. And when you put that into perspective, I think it's part of a women's history reconnection that people like this need to be remembered for the amount of work that they put into developing a plan that really has great virtue and could have been otherwise extremely uninteresting for the future.
The Garden City project, to be more specific, the Oak Hill branch of the project, was such an innovation because it involved the entire planning of a suburb in an environmentally conscious fashion. It was an extremely well-planned community that was one of very few. This district would provide fresh air, sunlight, breathing room, playing room. Not only was the Oak Hill area an innovation in its environmentally friendly nature, but also in the fact that a woman was behind it all. Clara Hamilton is the woman credited with bringing the Garden City movement to Hagerstown. So before this woman even had her right to vote, she was responsible for urban planning in an area that was at that time a bustling center of industry.